I'm George Lewis. Welcome to the Vortex Sarasota show. Sarasota has been Florida's hidden spiritual mecca for many years. Its transformative atmosphere is embraced by a circular flow of spiritual energy. The power of this vortex saturates all of Sarasota and can be noticed in subtle ways anywhere around town. Adding to this already tremendous force is the 40-acre white sandy beach of Siesta Key, made up of powdered quartz sand. Actually, a study by Harvard University's geology. Good evening. Welcome to the Vortex Sarasota show. I had a great guest for us tonight. My guest is Kimberly Braun. Kimberly's got quite a resume. She's been, well, you're going to see, she's done some really fantastic things. She promotes shows. I think you just did, Kimberly, you just did a show, Celebrate Wellness.
I did, a big festival.
April or March? March, wasn't it? Yeah, you had a great turnout. It worked really well for you. You're a Reiki master.
Yes.
And you teach yoga.
Teach meditation.
You teach meditation in a yoga environment.
Many yoga environments, but I teach it in a lot of different centers, to private groups, in church settings, and so I cross all boundaries with it.
Okay, great. And you're into New Age, martial arts, right?
I'm into a lot of New Age things.
Yeah, very good. And you're in reflexology? I saw you were getting your feet all...
I was getting reflexology done for me by someone who's a great expert.
She looked great, like her heart was really in it.
She's been doing it for 37 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Didn't really look that old, actually. So, your background is really pretty varied. When I look at what you were doing 10 years ago or 15 years ago compared to where you're at now, you were actually a contemplative. You were a monastic nun, is that right?
I was, yeah, for close to 11 years.
11 years.
Yeah.
So no wonder you're good at meditation.
I love the practice. I've actually, it's been my passion since I was about 5, contemplative practice in general.
Since you were 5?
Yeah. So the monastery was a natural progression, but my fire within me for the whole practice hasn't abated at all.
So, were you with Father Thomas Keating? Were you kind of a disciple of his?
No, I wasn't a disciple of anybody. I just had a lot of experiences in nature, in life circumstance, and ritual that taught me about that deeper living in the present moment and awareness. So from there, I consider myself a school of any and everybody.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah.
More people need to think that way. It's like, wow. And you were a liturgist? Is that how it's
Liturgist, yeah.
And from what I can see, that can be an argumentative post, right? It can be all kinds of things. Am I right?
I guess it depends on whether you have a real rigid stance when it comes to anything having to do with sacred ceremony and service and ritual, or whether you're there just for the service of the spiritual encounter. And I'm a little bit more of that mindset, so...
So you're not quite the dot the I's, cross the T's?
No, not at all. I'm all about, like, how do we get lost in this moment? How does what we're doing serve to just kind of break through all the barriers and
experience the presence of God?
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah. When that happens, all these petty arguments and stuff that creates so much trouble just kind of float away, don't they?
They do,
they disappear.
They do.
So... You were ordained with the Universal Brotherhood?
I was, yes.
And tell us about what is the Universal Brotherhood?
Sure. Well, my theological training was at the Washington Theological Union, part of a 12-school consortium up in Washington, D.C. So most of my ministerial training was really through that program.
Right.
But then I went forward because in my program I couldn't be ordained. So as I was down here, people were asking me to preside at weddings and funerals and create ceremonies for special moments in their life. And it's something that I have always loved to be a part of. So that just some friends who are part of the Universal Brotherhood reached out to me, and it was their path. So I did that so that I could officiate at a friend's wedding. And then I went on from there and did additional training in psychic healing and a lot of energy healing work with the Church of the Creator. So I actually did a double ordination so I could receive even more formation.
Where's the Church of the Creator?
There's not a basis for it. I think the home base is out in Oregon, somewhere west, but there's a contingency all over, and they work internationally, and they are very much a grid work type of movement.
Right.
So a lot of their ministers gather to sacred places that are vortexes of energy and hold a grid work to help kind of further the transformation of the planet. And I love them. I'm not drawn to that part, but I loved the training part, and that's where I keep my ordination up, is through Church of the Creator.
Gotcha. I was ordained in 1978, Universal Life Church.
Okay.
So it's a similar kind of thing.
Right.
One of the things that I find really interesting with you is your Catholic background, and how you fused it with the more New Age Eastern philosophies.
Yeah.
And tell me how you're able to do that.
Thank you. I know that's a wonderful. I feel very blessed.
You are blessed.
To feel.
I wish the whole world
that,
could do this.
Right. I think the main foundation that left me extremely open were all of my experiences, the unitive experiences that I have as a contemplative from my earliest years, left me open to see that everything is potentially or actually an opportunity to live in awareness, to commune with God, whatever the language is. And I have always experienced that when I am in those moments, there really aren't any words for it.
There sure aren't.
And
They're
all the
a
words
mystery.
and terminology and dogma and all of those things, they so fall away. They fall so short of the experience. So since that was my foundation of what made me really happy and was kind of my rudder in my life choices, it left me predisposed. So even though my background was Catholic, so naively, being really young, I wouldn't have thought of other paths than the Catholic monastic tradition. I brought to it a sense of I'm loved, all are loved, we're all on the path. It's kind of, we're all part of this big family. So I brought to it that, and didn't find myself that influenced by the things that would have been more black and white or divisive. And because I had that experience, then even within me, the things that needed to be dissolved that were more black and white and could be held up to that deeper experience. So then when I left the Catholic monastery and I went to grad school and then I worked with different traditions, it was experience alone that just taught me. I could sense the veracity of what was going on in the spirit of the soul that I was working with or listening to or learning from.
Right.
And that alone is much more compelling than an idea or a structure.
So what I just heard you do was give kind of a basic description of a mystic. Am I right?
Yes.
You kind of.
Yes.
And were you were a Carmelite?
I was.
Which is Teresa of
Avila and John of the Cross. And some big
guns in that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
they were my friends. That's why I went to be Carmelite.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. That it's kind of unfortunate what's gone on as far as mysticism is concerned. The word really carries kind of a stigma, and it's been bandied about so much. I was talking with one of the nuns up at the Franciscan Center.
Oh yeah.
They Franciscans are mystics, but they've disavowed the word mysticism.
Have they really?
They won't talk about being a mystic.
Wow.
It doesn't.
It's like an honor to be embracing that part of ourselves.
It was like it doesn't play well in the public image. And so, it was really interesting to me that they did that. When you talk with people about being a mystic, they conjure up all kinds of stuff. That people have put on as far as being a mystic. So you've been meditating for how long?
Well, it came very naturally when I was little. So my earliest recollection was when I was 5 or 6.
Were you trained at 5 or 6, or did you just do it naturally?
It was very naturally. What happened is I would find myself lost in the moment, kind of just experiencing those timeless, eternal moments that even as I recollect them, they're still just as alive. And as I experienced it, it was almost like just, the only way I can describe it is like time stopped and veils were pulled back. And then I entered into a reality that seemed more real to me than maybe my more superficial entry would have been.
So I think you touched on reality very early, because those experiences to me are more real than this stuff that we're doing out here.
I think so too. And it could be idealistic, but I think children in general are predisposed and have a lot more experiences. But the difference would be is that I connected the dots because I was so curious. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. And then I made a choice. This is what I want, or this is the path I want to be on. And I think that all children are having those experiences, and I could be wrong, but that are having them but maybe don't remember.
Or get trained out of them.
Or get trained out of them, or something else yes. So, yeah.
How was your family with this?
My family didn't know. I didn't share a lot of the things. Up until junior high school, some things were happening, and I would share. But
what was the reason you didn't share?
I didn't think to, because it was so natural.
It
was just a normal. It didn't seem like it was extraordinary or different. I thought everybody was looking at life the same way and experiencing life the same way.
Right.
So it didn't occur to me to even mention anything at all. And it was only later, it's actually when I entered the monastery that I realized that all these things that had been happening in my life weren't happening to all these with these women in that way. And I wasn't super surprised, but I was like, oh, okay.
So you were getting naturally what they were going to have to work for.
I suppose, right.
It's like, because it doesn't come so naturally to so many people. Well, how do you, the Catholic idea that Jesus was the Son of God and the only Son of God, does that carry into your New Age beliefs, your Eastern beliefs? Did you find any kind of a dichotomy there? Are you split with that?
I
Excuse me.
Don't feel inclined to have an idea as to whether that's true or not true. I would say that my experience and taking solemn vows, Christ in general is a really big part of my spirituality.
Well, it was a marriage there, right?
It was a marriage with God.
Right.
And since Jesus is part of the Trinity, but it wasn't a marriage with Jesus.
No,
but it was a marriage with God. My experience shares with me that there's nothing really to say, both experientially or theologically, that Jesus is the quote-unquote only Son of God.
Right.
A Son of God, or maybe an enlightened one, or maybe one that's experiencing the God presence within in its absolute fullness, could be wholly true.
Isn't that what he said?
Right, yes.
And ye are all gods.
Are all gods.
Right. Everybody here,
Right.
What's interesting is what I feel with you is you may be the first real live Christian I ever met. Quite honestly. I wish there were many, many more.
That's really something.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful. There would be so much more peace in the world with that. And I can see it in your face. You mentioned something about when you're young, or or when you went into the monastery, it made you happy.
Right.
Well, I'm convinced at this stage of my spiritual life that my job, spiritual job, is to do everything I can do to bring myself to a state of joy. And I think when I'm in joy, I'm making that connection with God, with a higher power. Yeah. And certainly we share whatever we have.
Right.
Right. So tell us about you have meditation CDs that you sell?
What I have is I do a lot of retreats.
Right.
Workshops, private sessions. I have a chant CD. I have a meditation app that will be downloadable in about a week or two on Android and iPhone. and I have a lot of meditation recordings.
Gotcha.
But I've been looking for the right channel because I want to develop something unique. I want to develop what's called a meditation library. Since I'm not of a particular tradition, yet I love to cull the essence from the different traditions. I want to have a library that people can try out many different styles and find what works for them. So a lot of the courses that I offer introduce people on a practical and experiential form, all of these different, what I would consider expressions of practices and awareness. Because what is Vipassana, that's sublime for some people, and for others it's agony.
Absolutely.
And using the imagination is just like eating cake for one person. And my whole attitude is that as we come to ourselves, it's like coming home. There's an ease and there's a familiarity, even if there's a lack of confidence around it. So when we find what allows it to be easy, then we naturally open and desire more. And that's my goal, because that's what my experience has been.
Well, that idea of being open and desiring more is the only way people are going to continue anyhow.
Right.
I got into meditation in 1978, I think, or no, 76, somewhere in there, through, oh boy, there went my mind.
Probably TM movement?
Yeah, through TM. As a matter of fact, I had a real estate company at that point, and I had salesmen all over the place, and I hired a TM teacher to come in and teach my salesmen.
Oh, that's great.
TM.
That's great.
And it was a good experience, and I've been meditating ever since. I've done a meditation CD. One of the things that in seeing what you did, you talk about a 3-point meditation
Process, yeah.
process,
That kind of
because
developed, yeah.
I'm very much in alignment with that idea. Because I don't think there's any such thing as a bad meditation.
Right.
It doesn't exist. Tell us about your 3-point process.
Thank you. Well, it evolved naturally, both from my work in studying theology and in my experience with people. And if I were to tack a word onto it, it's a ritual mentality.
Right.
So psychologically, we have something that happens during ritual. We come with an expectation. We leave our normal way of either looking at things or walking in our daily routine. So we step away into what might be kind of the unknown, or an opportunity for a liminal experience.
Right.
Then as we step away, we have the experience. And then once we have the experience, we want to be able to bring that quality of our experience of ourselves back into whatever our chosen lifestyle is.
Right.
So it's a psychology of ritual that has evolved from meditation. So the stepping away is preparing the outer space and the inner space.
Okay.
The body of it is the meditation technique you choose. And then the last piece is reintegration. So we ground it. Sometimes, as you know, if you are lost in this ecstatic bliss, you're like, I'm just going to quit my job, or I'm going to go, and you're not really integrated into what your life path is. So the integration process is just as important as the experience of bliss, and just as important as the surrendering of distraction or whatever's limiting you. So I have all three, and that's my 3-point process. And I kind of introduce it in a very subtle way in the meditation. They're just various little tidbits that are usually a part of it.
Kind of drop them in as you guide the meditation.
So you don't even know for sure. You might not, if you weren't thinking about it, notice that they're all there, but they all tend to be there.
So you're not hooking them on the rote part of it.
Right.
Right. They're just there, and it has to
so
be
that
every
it
time.
happens physiologically and psychologically and emotionally.
At this stage of my spiritual growth, if you will, or thinking, I'm convinced it's a good idea to be able to have my head in the clouds and my feet firmly planted on terra firma.
Right.
Because I've spent a few time out there in space somewhere. I was so spiritual, I was of no earthly good. And
I can relate to
that. It
that.
doesn't work all that well.
Right.
Well, also the Teilhard Chardin said that we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Right.
I contemplated that for quite a while. And what I realized was, if I'm a spiritual being already,
what do I practice in spirituality so hard? Maybe what I should be doing here is be the best human being that I can be.
That's great.
And that's my
I love
spiritual
that.
practice.
I love that.
you know.
That's great.
And it works for me,
Right.
So. You've got some new projects. You want to talk about those a bit?
I do. I am finishing my first book.
What is the book and the name? Have you got a name at
I
this
do
point?
have a name that could change, but right now the name has been called Sounding the Silence.
Oh, wow. That's a very clever name. I like it.
And it's part memoir, or memoir is the platform in which I explore a lot of spirituality themes. And it's 6 of the years that I was a monastic nun.
Oh, very nice.
And it has a lot of different layers. Part is just exploring, everyone likes to know like kind of what's behind the veil.
What's back
What's
there?
behind the, and I have so many fun, playful stories.
Uh-huh.
And so I would like to lay those out. And I want to lay out as well the challenges that come when we live in silence. So the opportunities and the challenge that are inherent when all we really have is ourselves and the divine. So it has that element to it. And then it also has an element of the evolution that happens when we're really open to self-realization. There's always an evolution in our thought that comes.
Absolutely.
And it never negates where we are at that moment, because I'm an Aries, so I tend to like put my whole heart into whatever I'm doing in that moment.
Right.
So as I spoke about my belief system when I'm 18, I don't believe that way at all anymore. But man, if you heard me talk then, I would have been like, this is it,
It's the only way.
So I kind of engaged that whole evolution of thought in a subtle way. Also, I happened to end up synchronistically being the general contractor and principal fundraiser and designer for a huge monastery. And I built it off donations. It's worth a little under $10 million.
Wow.
It's patterned after the missions. And I fell into the role. But what played out is that I had 100% belief in the project. And the fact that I knew nothing about being a general contractor, I knew nothing about being an architect, I knew nothing about fundraising on that type of level, didn't matter.
Intent and faith are
It just didn't matter.
Right.
And and so it's this physical fruit of what can happen when we believe without any shadow of a doubt. So part of it is just giving people the inspiration of that in my own life.
Right.
And the amazing people that step forward, the witness to their generosity, their own inspiring stories. So it has all those layers. It also has some of the layers of ending up, being a woman in a male-dominated religion, and
Huge
some
male-dominated
some
religion.
pieces like that, and archetypal themes, and so it's a mix of all of those things as I've kind of been reflecting these past 10 years. So.
Well, you brought up a question for me on the male dominance thing. Was that like that within the Carmelite
The
order?
monastic. Well,
I know they had John was the, John of the Cross was the advisor,
he was a
head guy,
confessor.
kind of.
Yeah. The Carmelite order is autonomous, so like the Franciscans, they're mendicant, which means that once a group starts up, their hierarchy and their government is mostly autonomous.
Okay.
There's a loose relation to the whole order, and then ultimately to Rome. There is a relation to that whole structure.
Right.
But it's a little looser than a lot of other orders.
So they come with their own structure then.
They get to discern. We got to say, how are we going to live out this charism a little more freely?
Okay.
However, I still found that there was a very strong mentality of the spiritual leadership superiority of men versus women, the looking to the inspiration from the priests versus feeling like we had it within ourselves.
The old alpha male stuff.
Right. So there was that piece, and there are some direct instances with the building project that I kind of encountered that in a much more grounded way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it still existed, a lot of hierarchical views as a means to transformation. So not just that it was like government that doesn't carry a spiritual imperative. It was it had a spiritual imperative to it.
And did you find during that spiritual imperative that the males were learning?
Learning.
Or in other words, they were evolving within the framework of,
You know, because we lived in silence in that, I can't say that I had that much of an experience of the order in its larger picture. I only have the immediate experience
right,
of what we took away from, because we didn't watch TV, we didn't, we lived a very seclusive lifestyle. But my experience is that some of those mentalities were ingrained. And it was easy living in silence to not care, because you're really like alone with God.
and you don't really run into that.
And you don't run into
You
it
don't
because
bump
it's not
into it.
limiting you. But when I began the building project and I accepted that as really a divine calling, then I was speaking on behalf of us, and I was kind of called into a leadership where I then got more of a taste of what that would look like in normal human relationships.
Right, right.
Yeah.
You know, I had a hunch that things were going to go really fast tonight. We got about,
Where was I?
yeah, we got about 4 minutes left is all.
Okay.
And I'd like to give you the opportunity to hit on some things that, whatever is on your mind you'd like to talk about before we.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, I'm honored to be here. I was extremely honored to be asked to be a part. I really would love to highlight these silent retreats that I'm offering.
Please do.
I am blessed to have the use of a house in Englewood that's right on Lemon Bay.
Oh, wow.
And I'm offering once a month, just to 6 individuals, a silent retreat experience from Friday late afternoon till Sunday late afternoon. And I'm able to charge very little. It's only $200, and that covers the lodging and all the food. It's all vegetarian,
Wow, that's a
dairy
bargain.
options. There's long periods of meditation. There are 4 inspirational instructional talks. There are 3 optional guided meditations, and there are about 10, 12 hours of Vipassana meditation offered. So it's a great getaway, but it's a great opportunity to kind of tip your toe in the water in the whole retreat experience.
Right.
And I have a few spots in each of them left, but I've been having a big response, and I would love for people to know about it, because I'll have the use of the house only till October.
Do you have a website that they should go to, or a place?
Great,
Huh?
yes. You can email me at kimberly@kimberlybraun.com. That's BRAUN. And my website is www.kimberlybraun.com. And if you join my newsletter on the homepage, you get the updates as to when that's available and when the app would be downloaded.
Great,
And all
great.
that. So
So you got a lot of neat stuff going on. When do you expect your book to be ready for publication?
I'm floating query letters now. I have
Good
a
for you.
polished book proposal all done. I want to go through an agency. If I go through an agency and get a cash advance so I can do just that for a couple
Mhm.
months, I'd have it done in 2 to 3 months. If I need to be working full time and doing it, probably more like 6 months.
Right, yeah, well, you'd be
Yeah.
doing well to do it in 6 months.
I know.
I wrote a book and it
Right.
just, but I did it in like 6 weeks, but I just got into it.
Good for
know.
you.
Yeah, it just kind of flowed out, but the publishing world, as you're probably finding out, boy, it's a strange world.
It is.
It's
It's an
very
evolving world.
closed.
It's like it's all on water.
Oh, it's definitely all on water, isn't it? Pontoons. It's
Right.
like- it's pretty wild. So did we miss anything?
I don't think so. There's always more. It's such a fun arena to talk about.
When you get your book published,
Yes.
contact me. We'll have you back on the show.
Okay,
As a matter of
thank
fact, I'll have
you.
you on my other show, which is an hour show.
Okay.
All right, and we'll chat and see if we can help you sell some of your books.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I guess we are out of time. Am I right, Julie?
Yes.
Okay, well, I appreciate everybody who joined us tonight. I'm sure you had a good time. I hope you had as good a time with Kimberly as I did. She's a super guest. Definitely go to KimberlyBraun.com if you've ever thought about doing a retreat like that. I just can't recommend it enough. So, same time, well, not the same time next week. We're going to come back next week at 7 o'clock again. And I have this tendency to change my mind occasionally, so I made it 6:30 tonight and didn't recall that I made it 6:30. So be sure and come back next week, and in the meantime, don't forget to accentuate the positive and have a fantastic week.